Hello, we are live on YouTube. It's youtube.com/ at Jesus Gospel TV. And I am here during Holy Week. This is Holy Week to talk about the continuation of Jesus's beatings. This is all based upon my book, The Jesus Gospel. And it's going to show you here. It's available, and please get the chance, please pick it up. I have a brand new website just updated. So the Jesus Gospel, the book is endorsed by Clarence Thomas from the Supreme Court, and this is all cleaned up 33 years in the making. So it's the first book ever, to my knowledge, that has combined the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, into one narrative, only using the words from the Bible. So pick up a copy of the Jesus Gospel, and the website is jesusgospel.com. Now, I want to show you what we did last week, when we talked about the beating of Jesus, because it goes on for so long, I couldn't even cover it in one teaching. So we covered chapter 20 of last week, and that was Jesus' arrest and Peter's denials. Jesus prays. He has the betrayal. He is arrested while it is still dark. They come with lanterns and lights. So this is important to understand. He is bound and led away. And then he gets before one of the first high priest, Annas. Peter denies Jesus. Then they bring him before Caiaphas, and Caiaphas condemns him to death. And then Caiaphas' servants and the high priest guards, they began to beat Jesus. And then we have the second through the sixth denials, which now they start happening at night. So all of this stuff happened up here, took the whole day. Remember, he gets arrested during night. And now, by the time he gets condemned to death and they start beating him, it's already night and cold, and there are fires to keep them warm. It's important to understand, because now when we go to chapter 121, it's something interesting. Now, we finished off chapter 20, whereas Jesus' beatings continued, probably during the night. And this is where the Lord turned and looked at Peter when the second rooster crowed. After you deny me twice, after the rooster crows twice, you should deny me thrice. 2 times 3 is 6. Right here, there's the wording. And this is the sixth time. Peter denied Jesus 6 times. And at the exact same time, after hours and hours of being beaten, Jesus turns around and looks at Peter, and the beatings continue. Now, starting in chapter 21, here we go. And straightway in the morning. Now, this is important to understand. Now, he was arrested early in the morning. Some people say Monday morning, whatever. The trials took all day Monday. The beatings, we know, were at night, because they had the fire and they had the lanterns. So that we know that the whole day took it. Now it's the morning. So there's evidence here based upon that Jesus' beatings had taken all night in front of Caiaphas' high priest. So now, as soon as it was morning, they had a consultation, and they asked him, "Art thou Christ?" Now, isn't this deja vu? Wait a second. Didn't they have this conversation? And he says, if I tell you, I won't believe you. Are you the Son of God? He said, yes, I am. Now, let's go back a few pages, because we're on page 251. We're going to go to page 247. Here, it says, the high priest said, answer thou, which of thee witnessed against thee? Jesus said, he held his peace. And the high priest said, I adjure thee by the living God, tell us if you are Christ. You have said, art thou Christ the blessed? And he said, I am. So when he said this earlier, before all the beatings, now all the beatings take place. He's beaten for hours through the night. And then in the morning, what happens? They do the same thing. Are you Christ? Deja vu, here we go, all over again. And they are continuing threatening him. So listen, we're going to condemn him to death. This is the second time they condemn him to death. Now they bring him to Pilate. Now I want to show you something here. The trial of Jesus Christ before Pilate is the most detailed event in the whole Bible, the most detailed single event in the whole Bible. And I wonder why. I'm not sure I understand why so much detail went into it. Let me just give a quick review. Jesus is before Caiaphas and the entire council. And this is at the beginning of chapter 21. Then he's brought to Pontius Pilate at the judgment hall. Judas returns to 30 pieces of silver. Pilate leaves the judgment hall to speak to the crowd. Pilate goes back to the judgment hall, speaks to Jesus. Pilate goes out again to speak to the people. Pilate sends Jesus to Herod. But then Herod sent him back to Pilate. Now, all this takes time. This is all taking time. This is very detailed, what's going on. Got a picture the back and forth. So Jesus is before Pilate a second time. The crowd asked Barabbas, not Jesus, to be released. Pilate sits in the judgment seat. It's very important. This is the Bema seat. This is the seat that Jesus is going to sit on to judge the whole world. Eventually, the roles are going to be switched, where Jesus will be in the Bema, in the judgment seat, and before him will be Pilate, Pontius Pilate, who didn't believe. Pilate tells the crowd that Jesus has done nothing worthy of death. Pilate goes back in the judgment hall as the soldiers beat Jesus. Pilate goes out again to the people, bringing Jesus. Now he's all beat up after all night being beat up by the palace guards. Now he's being beat up by Pilate's guards. Pilate goes again to the people, bringing Jesus. Pilate and the soldiers and Jesus go back in the judgment hall. Pilate goes out to the people and attempts to release Jesus. You see all this detail. It's just really amazing. Pilate brings out Jesus again, sits on the judgment seat again. He appeals to the crowd the third and last time. He is unable to release Jesus, so he washes his hands. And Jesus is sentenced to be crucified. He is scourged with bones and metal on the ends of 12-inch rubber, so it would be flexible and it would hit you. And he's then taken to the common hall, which is the praetorium, which is all the soldiers there, and he is beaten again by 600 soldiers. Now, let's go to the record. This is Holy Week, and it's important to understand the beatings that Jesus went through. And the reason for that is I want to tell you, after 3 days and 3 nights of beatings, where he did not get any sleep, he decided that he was going to die at a specific time, at the exact time. And that time was when the Passover lamb was killed at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And that's when he died. And the temple would blow the horns, and all the people, the Jews, were required at that point to bow their heads. And they were to bow their heads. And hello, Kevin, just joined. I'm in the middle, so I'm just going to continue. Kevin, if you don't mind. We're on my book. We're on page 231. Jesus is brought to the Pontius Pilate, so we're there. So it's early in the morning. Wait a second. So Jesus Christ was beaten all night. So now, after all this, it was still early. So Judas returns to 30 pieces of silver, which was prophesied in the Old Testament. He's saying, I have sinned. I betrayed innocent blood. And the priests say, well, that's your problem, not mine, basically. So he throws down the silver. Now I'm just paraphrasing. You can see the words in front of your screen here, and you can make your own determination. Again, this is from my book, The Jesus Gospel. You can buy it at jesusgospel.com. And this adds a richness to the record of Jesus that is not available anyplace else, and especially the beatings that he went through. And as I was saying, that he was beaten for 3 days and 3 nights and no sleep. He kept himself alive for a specific time, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when the Passover lamb was supposed to be killed for the Passover on the preparation day, so that he kept himself alive to die at that point. And it's my humble point of view. This is not scriptural, but it's just a point of view that no other human would have been able to keep themselves alive through 3 days and 3 nights of beatings with no sleep. They would not have lived, but he had to keep himself alive to die at that specific point, which is why when he was praying, it was like blood of sweat came, because he knew how horrible the beatings were going to be. So, they took the 30 pieces of silver, the priest, and they bought a potter's field to bury strangers in. This is not the field that Judas had purchased. Judas was the holder of the bag, the money bag, the donation bag, and he was stealing during the whole time that Jesus was his ministry. And he had stolen money and bought a field. That field is where he killed himself, not in the field that the priests purchased. Interesting point then. But goes by Jeremiah the prophet. They took the 30 pieces of silver, and this is quoted from Zechariah 11:12 through 13. So, and he gave in the potter's field as the Lord appointed. Now, here's the first time Pilate leaves the judgment hall, speaks to the crowd. He says, "What do you accuse this guy for? And if he was a bad guy, why would you deliver it? If he wasn't bad, he wouldn't be here." And he said, "Oh, he perverted the nations. He didn't give tribute to Caesar." Now, listen, it's funny. The Jews, they hated Caesar. They wanted to be free from Caesar. So now they're accusing Jesus of saying, let's not be with Caesar. Of course, Pilate would think this is unusual and says, "Yeah, right. Tell me another one." And then Pilate said, "Look, take and judge him yourself. Do what you want." And it's not law. And the Jews said, "Well, it's not lawful to put any man to death." Now, the Romans had a law that no Jew could put another Jew to death. They changed that law because of what happened here, because of all the craziness. And this is why Stephen, in the book of Acts, was allowed to be stoned to death by the Jews, because the Romans said, "Okay, you want to kill people? We're not going to get involved with all this craziness that we had, everything with Jesus Christ, too much drama. You take care of it yourself." So, but now in this situation, they were not allowed to put anybody to death. The Romans had to do it. So Pilate goes into judgment hall. He calls Jesus and he says, "Are you the King of Jews?" And this is like the question that keeps on getting asked of Jesus. And he says, "You say so, do you think so, or did other people tell you that?" And Pilate says, "Hey, I'm not a Jew. Your own chief priests have delivered me. So deliver you to me. What did you do? You must have done something really bad. Are you a king?" And Jesus says, "Listen, my kingdom's not of this world. Okay, so you don't have to worry. I'm not trying to take your place. I'm not trying to take Caesar's place. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would fight for me, and I would never be delivered to the Jews. But it's not time for my kingdom, so I'm going to have to suffer." This probably went right over the head of Pilate. He had no idea who he was talking about, and says, "Listen, are you a king?" That's the only thing that Pilate was interested in. Is that if you're a king, then okay, we're going to have to take care of you because you're not anointed by Caesar. And he says, "You say I'm a king, but for this reason I was born. And this is why I came into the world. I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone that is of the truth hears my voice." And this is very important to understand, because many people today quote the Bible verse that says, "The truth will set you free." And people say, "Oh, tell me the truth. Is my wife cheating on me? It will set me free." And they find out the truth, and they're upset and they're mad. They don't feel like they're set free. The truth will set you free. Jesus Christ said, "I am the way, the truth, and the light. So Jesus, and the life, I'm sorry, and the life. So Jesus is the truth. Jesus sets you free. Two things equal to the same thing are equal to the others. So truth and Jesus are the same. So Jesus will set you free. But Pilate says, what is truth? I don't know. It's your truth, my truth. We even hear that today. Well, that's your truth, but my opinion is a little bit different. Listen, we have to be accurate here. There is only one truth, and that truth is in the Bible. And he went out to the Jews and said, this is Pilate. He said, listen, I find no fault in this man. He says his kingdom's not ready. It's not here. I'm not worried about him. He's not trying to replace Caesar. Keep in mind, years before, this guy Thaddeus had joined together 400 men to try to attack the Romans. And the Romans had got a cohort, which is over 600 men, and they went across the Jordan where they were camping and killed them, destroyed them, and captured Thaddeus. And this is recorded in secular texts, which is by Josephus. So the point here is they didn't know about Jesus. Was Jesus another Thaddeus? Did he have more than 400 followers? Did he have 1,000? This is why when they arrested Jesus, there was over 1,000 people coming to arrest him, including over 600 Roman soldiers, because they said, we got to be prepared for this guy. He could be another Thaddeus, getting a whole bunch of people to attack. But here's the point. Pilate says, hey, he's not trying to attack us. So he doesn't have this kind of following. We're not worried about it. But all the people are yelling out, oh, he's making a problem. It's too much drama. We have to, we have to get rid of this guy from Galilee. Whoa. Pilate loved that. I love that. I guess what? That's out of my jurisdiction. That's not my area. So I'm done with this, and I'm going to send him to Herod. Now, Pilate and Herod were not friends. They were not friends. But interesting enough, they became friends because of this particular situation. So he sends him to Herod, who happened to be at Jerusalem at that time. Why? Because there was thousands and thousands of Jews for the Passover, and there needed to be a controlling force of Romans there. So Jerusalem was packed. And, he was desiring to see Jesus, because I said, I want to see some tricks. This is Herod. Do some tricks, pull a rabbit out of a hat for me, do some type of miracle. I want to see a miracle. It's just, he had no interest in God. He had no interest in truth. So, but Jesus didn't answer because the guy didn't want to know the real truth. So his men, they mocked him. Now, I don't know. It means to ridicule, to treat with contempt. And I think it's interesting here that it says men of war. Now, men of war, are they going to beat Jesus? They might. It doesn't specifically say so here. It says that they ridiculed, they contempt him, they mocked him, they put a robe around him. It doesn't say he beat him, but it's possible that they did. But because of this, the two enemies, Pilate and Herod, they became good friends. Hey, we got this Jesus. So now Jesus is before Pilate a second time. Here we go again. Pilate, he called together the chief priests and rulers, and everybody was accusing Jesus. Hundreds of people here, okay? And Pilate said, there's so many people are witnessing against you, he said to Jesus, don't you have a word to say? He says, don't you have nothing? I mean, don't you know that these people are accusing you of these horrible things? Jesus said nothing. Pilate was marveled. I mean, this guy doesn't want to defend himself. I'm trying to give him a chance, but there's no chance to be given. So then the crowd starts yelling. Now, this is important because what happened during Passover is that the Romans would, as a symbol, saying, because of Passover, we will release one prisoner. There was two prisoners there, Jesus and this guy Barabbas. Barabbas was a murderer. And so the people really wanted Jesus, okay? But you have to understand, Pilate had gathered together the chief priests and all the elders, and they had told people in advance, hey, when it's time to ask for who to be released, yell for Barabbas. So it was all fixed in advance. This was basically fixed. I want to make clear to you that the people that were yelling for Jesus to be murdered were not the people of the town the week before during Palm Sunday that were saying glory to God in the highest, and they were putting down the palm trees because people say, oh, the same people that were doing this were condemning him. That's not necessarily true because we already see here that Pilate had gathered all the leaders together. So the leaders were the ones. So interesting point to think about anyway. So the multitude began to cry, and we don't want Jesus, we want Pilate. And he says, okay, uh, why don't I just release the king of the Jews? And I was making fun of that comment, he's the king of the Jews. He knew the chief priests hated that term. So he was goading them here, saying, ha ha, hey, he's your king of the Jews. Why don't I let him go? Now, this is important, interesting. Pilate sits in the judgment seat, and I said this before. This is the Bema. This is the seat that Jesus is going to sit in to judge everybody. So eventually, these roles are going to be reversed. He sat down, and his wife said, oh my God, don't do anything to this man. I have had many things in a dream about him. In other words, this is a good man. Don't harm him. But the chief priests and the elders were screaming and yelling, oh, we must get rid of him. Give us Barabbas, kill Jesus. And so he says, okay, well, now comes the time for the decision. He goes out and says, who do you want? Are these two? You want Barabbas or you want Jesus? Again, here I'm paraphrasing from my book, The Jesus Gospel. We're in chapter 21. Please purchase the book. Go to jesusgospel.com, jesusgospel.com. But Pilate said, hey, listen, he's done nothing worthy of death. You have brought this guy to me as somebody who's perverting the people. I examined him. I have find no fault. All the things you're accusing him, I don't see that he's did. Herod, he doesn't see anything either. So we don't believe he's worthy of death. I will release and chastise him. And now chastise him means to beat him with whips and chains, and also with, they call these palms, which is the things that are about 12 inches of leather, which is flexible, and then on the back, on the end, is a piece of a bone or a piece of metal that when you fling it, it rips into your skin and takes a piece out. This is important to understand because in the Old Testament it says his vision was beyond that, recognizable as a human being. So obviously they hit him in the face with this and they ripped pieces of his face out. The Passion of Christ was an amazingly good movie, but the beatings that Jesus went through there, it only scratched the surface of what we're seeing. So now we're seeing the second beating of Jesus, and it's very serious. And I want to point out to you, we go back to Genesis when Jesus Christ, when God said to Satan, hey, there's going to be a guy coming, born from a woman, and you two are going to have a battle. You're going to bruise his heel, but he's going to crush your head. So from that point on, from the beginning of Genesis to now, he was trying to either get rid of the Jewish people, kill the Christ line, make sure he wasn't born. After Jesus was born, he was trying to stop him at every turn. He was trying to trick him. And now he's got Jesus. Do you think Satan held back any evil? No, the evil was let loose. These people were possessed would do as much evil as possible. And so he says, okay, release Barabbas. So Pilate goes back and he beats and scourges Jesus. And we're going to look at scourge, which is in the Bible dictionaries, to beat with a whip consisting of thongs with pieces of metal or bone attached to the end, designed to hasten death on the cross. Okay, so in other words, one of the problems, there was two problems. Number one, the Romans didn't like people hanging on the cross for hours. Do you know how you die on the cross? You die from asphyxiation. You can't breathe. So you're hanging up like this, and you kick your feet up to take a breath. So and people could last for a relatively long time. So they would say, well, we got to beat these people before they get on the cross so they die. Jesus was beaten for 3 days and 3 nights. So he was really excruciatingly horrible, very horrible. So they scourged Jesus again, and they put a crown of thorns, mocking him. Aha, you're the king of the Jews. And these are the soldiers now. These are not the force of the cohort, the 600 soldiers that arrested Jesus. This is like the guard of the king. These are the elite soldiers. So they're separate. We would call them like the Secret Service, I guess. So they made fun of him and they smote him with their hands and they did that. Again, he was out to Jesus and they bring him out all bloodied. He already went through all night of being beat. Now he's being beat again. He's bloodied. And he says, I bring them forth to you. I find no fault in this guy. And then came Jesus wearing a crown and a purple robe. And the purple robe is indication of royalty. And he says, behold the man, what should I do with Christ? You know, he's the king of the Jews. Again, he's gouting the Jews. He's edging them on. They hated that. But when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried, crucify him, crucify him. They were totally possessed. They just wanted blood. Pilate said, take him, crucify him, for I have no fault. The Jews answered, we have a law that he should die because he made himself the Son of God. Pilate heard that saying, and he became more afraid. Now, this became a religious issue, which scared Pilate, because if the Jews saying he's a son of God, he is something that all of the Jewish people would be very upset about, and it could cause a major problem in the city. And you have to understand the way Caesar worked. If there was a trouble in the city and the king there or Pilate or Herod couldn't handle it, they would be replaced. Sometimes that replacement wasn't very kind. Sometimes they would be taken care of. So this is one of the reasons Pilate got afraid. He didn't want this situation to get out of control, and it was getting out of control totally. So again, I told you, this particular series of events is like so detailed. In my opinion, the most detailed single event in the entire Bible. So Pilate goes back in the judgment hall, and he says to Pilate, who are you, you know? And he says, why don't you speak to me? Don't you know I have the power to crucify you? I could kill you. He says, you have no power against me except it was given from God. This was ordained from Genesis that this is how Satan is going to bruise Jesus's heel. What a horrible bruising. This is not just his heel. This is really horrible. And he says, therefore, he that delivered me had the greatest sin. Who's that? Not Pilate, but Judas has the greatest sin. That's who delivered him from them. Okay. Interesting point about the Judas. Even though Judas felt sorry and repented, quote unquote, he did not seek forgiveness. In other words, it's one thing to say you're wrong. It's another thing to say I was wrong and ask for forgiveness. And he didn't take that step. He never confessed his sin, so his sin remains. If you don't confess your sin remains. Space does not permit a review of all possible motivations for Judas, but one which is popular with most commentators is that he wanted to bring in the new kingdom to get the Romans out and get a new David in, and he was pushing for a significant role in the new government. He didn't know that Jesus' kingdom was not of this world. Again, Pilate goes out to the people. This is quite an event, back and forth, back and forth. And he says, he still wants to release Jesus, but the Jews cried out, if you let this man go, you're not Caesar's friend. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar. So now the Jews are threatening Pilate. Oh, if you don't kill this guy, Jesus, we're going to go to Caesar and saying, hey, you're letting this other guy to be a king, Caesar. This guy's going to cause problem. Holy cow, that caused a lot of concern in Pilate's eyes. I'm going to take a quick drink here. Oh boy, that's good. So Pilate brings Jesus out again, and he sits in a judgment seat again, the Bema. My goodness, he's done it 3 times now. And he said he brought him forth, and in a place that's called the pavement, which is Gabbatha, in the preparation of Passover, and he says, "Okay, here's your king." Again, he's goading them. He's kind of getting them mad. Okay, this is the king of the Jews. You're gonna kill the king of the Jews, which is the absolute truth. They Jews were king. Okay, but they cried out, "Away with him! Crucify him!" Uh, Pilate said, "Well, I'm going to crucify your king. He's your king." Again, he's goading them. And he said, "We have no king but King Caesar." Boy, they complain about Caesar all the time. They can't wait to get rid of Caesar. But now, when it's convenient, oh, we have no king but Caesar. At least this placated Pilate so he would feel comfortable that they weren't going to, in mass, go to Caesar and complain about him. So it made him feel a little bit more secure. But then he appeals to the crowd one last time. This guy really, he hasn't done anything. Why evil has he done? I don't find any cause. Do you see how long this event is just with Pilate? Let me just beat him and let him go. And they say, "Crucify him and crucify him." And the voices of the chief priests prevailed. They were telling people, "Crucify, crucify, crucify." They were possessed. Pilate is unable to release Jesus. So he says, "Listen, I wash my hands, not my responsibility." So his death is not on my hands. When he saw he could not prevail, but a turmoil was happening, it was going to be a riot, it was going to be out of control, and his leadership may have been called into question. He said, "Listen, I'm innocent of blood. This is a just person." Now, that's interesting. Now, we have a Gentile calling Jesus just, but we have Jews, the king of the Jews, calling him unjust. Interesting. Now, this is very interesting because the Jews said, "Let his blood be on us and our children." It's interesting that in the book of Acts, just a couple of years later, when they were talking about Peter and Paul, and they said, "How dare you? You're trying to bring this man's blood upon us." So here they say, "Put the blood on us," and later they say, "Oh, why? We don't want that blood on us. We never said that." So it's interesting point right there. So really, Pilate has done as much as he can here. There's really nowhere else to go. He's tried this, he's tried that, he's tried this. Okay, his wife, all this stuff, but so Pilate gave a sense that it should be required and that he should be crucified. He released Barabbas for sedition and murder, and he was released from prison as they desired. And then he scourged Jesus again, just to make him weak before he goes to crucifixion. Now, this goes on. This is the second beating, and now we enter into the third beating, which is going to go through the whole night. This whole thing took a lot of time. We went through it. It was a lot of time, but now it's getting towards evening, and Jesus is brought to the praetorium, and he is beaten by the cohort of 600 soldiers. Remember, these were the same 600 soldiers that came and arrested him. And do you think Satan held back at all? No, they went wild with the lust of vengeance against Jesus. They stripped him, put him on purple, a robe, placed a crown on him, and they put it on his head and mock him, "Hail, King of the Jews, hail." And they spit him and took the reed and smote him, spit on, bowed their knees and worshiped him jokingly. And now this happens all night. And next week we'll talk about the following chapter 22. And they let him out the next morning to be crucified, because we know it was in the morning when he was crucified at 9 o'clock. So the beatings happened all night. It's important that God says to us, Jesus says to us, "Put these things in remembrance so you know what I did for you." I just didn't die, but I died a horrible death. And in my opinion, I'm going to tell you, he died a death, endured a the pain that nobody else could possibly endure. 3 days and 3 nights, no sleep, probably a little bit more than 3 days and 3 nights. And he kept himself alive to die at the designated time at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Can you imagine that? Every other human being, in my opinion, would rather say, let me die instead of endure the pain. I don't want to stay alive just so I can die for a specific time. But the palace blew the horns at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Every person who had a lamb, a perfect lamb for the Passover, would take it out back to their home and cut its throat and kill it to prepare it for the Passover meal. At that exact moment, they would blow the horns. Every Jew was required to stop what they were doing, whatever they were doing, and bow their head for a moment of silence in reverence to the Passover lamb. They didn't realize that they were actually giving reverence to Jesus Christ. I want to thank you for listening to this. I want to thank you for what has been said here during Holy Week. And after all this, Jesus is resurrected from the dead. Thank you. God bless you. I'll see you next week. If you have any interest, please purchase the book, JesusGospel.com. There's a contact if you want to contact there. We have Bible study every Thursday, and you can join us. God bless you in Jesus Christ's name.